Welcome to this episode of Future Proof Use Go F Yourself podcast. Today we are talking about layoffs. And if you don't feel it in the air, as John said, there are some frosty hiring and cold corporate practices going on during the winter of 2025. And we decided to bring you everything you need to know about layoffs, what's going on in the job market, who's laying people off, what to do when you see some of your friends or coworkers get laid off, or if you've been laid off, especially for a while, what are some steps you can take to get control of your career? I am joined by my hosts,
Good afternoon.
Dan Yu and John Lovig. Thanks for joining, guys.
Oh, hello.
Dan, let's start with you. Give us the pulse of what's going on in 2025. At time of recording, we're a week away from the winter break here.
This has been
what do you see in the job market?
A momentous year. Just in 2025, according to the latest job numbers, there's been over a million, about 1.1 million layoffs in 2025. That's a year-over-year jump of 54%. And it's looking like it's the worst since COVID in 2020 and the financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. And so there's been this kind or this size of disruption in the job market 6 times since going back to the recession of 1993. And if you look at the government provided data, that's really the JOLTS number, really that's a very key marker of the job markets. They actually project a higher number. They've recorded, I think it's 1.9 million as of the end of October.
Yeah, I mean, one of my questions for John is, what numbers should we pay attention to? Like, there was a big ordeal around the government's own numbers on layoffs and hiring being wrong, and the formulas. What's a source that you trust, or somewhere that we should give credence to on that topic, John?
I mean, it's tough. The government, always wants to try and curry good-looking numbers. I think ADP's report is usually pretty solid as well, and some of the other payroll providers run reports on a quarterly or monthly basis that is good to look at. And they'll ring pretty similar to the government numbers. There'll be discrepancies, but they'll still have something similar. And, they're extrapolating from thousands of data sets, including their own payrolls. So it's a little bit easier for them. They're providing the actual pay.
Yeah. Dan, what about with some of these specific companies or industries? We're hearing, most layoffs and biggest waves since the recession, but things like tech, the federal government, now that it's been funded and opened for about a month now.
Well, we've seen
what do we
layoffs,
need to know by industry?
obviously with the disruption in the federal market, the federal government. That's been going on, since this new administration's come in. But the trickle down, effect has really been across industries, right? So we've seen the biggest numbers in tech, telecom, retail, airlines, even food. So you just look at some of the biggest companies that are out there. Amazon, Verizon, IBM, Starbucks, right? Meta, Microsoft. UPS, right? So if a company like UPS, which really is a kind of a bellwether for online retail delivery, if they're laying off, maybe they're seeing something that there's just less demand.
Well, you see this also in, we don't have it in the numbers here, but the seasonal hiring is far lower this year than in past years by, I think, about half, which isn't a good sign for consumer spending. And consumer spending always goes up around now anyway, just because people spend during the holidays. So of course people will use those numbers as proof. But like Black Friday numbers were up Yeah, of course they were up. That's when the deals were happening. That means people have no choice but to buy when there's really good deals.
Yeah. So, how about when you see your colleagues get laid off, which all of us have experienced, some more recently than others? What are some of the tips? Like, how should somebody respond to the empty desk next to them, or the person they, used to work with closely is no longer at the company? Dan, this is really your area of expertise. What are
Well, I
some
think
tips for people who see this
one is
happening
to
around them?
first, thank your lucky stars that you were part of that round, but also be aware that it could be a trend, right? That's the first thing. And knowing that it could be a trend, given the overall state of the market, there's definitely some things you can do to prepare yourself should that happen, so you don't get caught, in a bind. And one of the main things that I recommend to people that if you see that your college is getting laid off, or if you get laid off and you still have some time before you're asked to leave, one of the main things is you got to download all your contacts, right? I mean, and really connect to everyone you know, both internally and externally. That's going to be the basis for how you find your next job, right? We've discussed here many times, and we've taught it in our classes, that networking is by far the best way to find your next role. Not applying online, right? You want to get out of that big pile of applicants, and the best way to do is networking. And so your contacts end up being the best resource for you. Another thing that you can do is download your performance reviews, right? Or if you can't really download them, take screenshots of your performance reviews. That's going to have hopefully your KPIs, right? Your really meaningful numbers that you saved X amount of money, you made Y amount of money. Those are things that you're going to want to have on your LinkedIn profile. John, I know that you've got a lot of good insights on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my mind, it's also time to start networking in general, right? Put feelers out because you don't want to wait till you don't have anything before, the wool gets pulled or the carpet gets pulled out from underneath you. And so definitely start reaching out to your network, have coffee chats, take someone out for a drink, or just, have a warm up conversation with people. You don't have to say you're actively looking. You could just say, oh, just thinking about what's next. There've been a lot of layoffs, not sure where things are going to go. Let's face it, most times when companies have layoffs, it's kind of interesting because layoffs are for performance, to improve performance by slimming down and creating less cost. But typically, you see dips in performance after layoffs because people lose interest. There's some quiet quitting, I'm sure that happens. And I know if I were to see layoffs happen at a company I was working for, I would probably start to say, why do I owe these people anything? Right? They don't care about my well-being. And so you probably start to see that happen in org. So, definitely start reaching out to people, have conversations, reach out to some recruiters in your specific space. Make sure you're posting content pretty regularly so that you're getting yourself out there and priming yourself for the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, my mental test is, what if that was me? So, say someone in your department or a whole department got laid off, it wasn't you. Well, if it was, what would you wish you would be doing right now? What would be the first thing you do when you got home or logged off that day? That's what you should do, and just be glad that you weren't on that list. I also think there's a huge difference between the reach out message. We've all gotten these. You guys more than me. The reach out message of, "Hey, I got laid off. Do you have any jobs?" versus, "Hey, how are you? I see you're doing this thing, just checking in." And the person isn't actually looking for a job. There is this filter, I think, in our DM inbox and in our brains that those are two totally different messages. One of them is purely transactional. One of them might be, but it at least gives the appearance of being personable and human and emotionally intelligent. And nobody wishes their first message in a year to a former boss or colleague is that I'm looking for a job. So don't let it be. Just send them one right now and just say, hey, what are you working on? How are things over there? I'm over here doing this. And then if you get laid off, it's like, oh, remember when I texted you 3 weeks ago? I'm not just looking for a job,
Yeah.
but I got laid off.
Yeah. I think also these are behaviors we personally feel you should be doing regularly anyway. You should have every week one or two top of mind people you want to check in with who you haven't talked to in a while. Just catch each other up on how things are going. Before Dan and I started doing this, he would call me pretty regularly. I would call him pretty regularly. We even just set up like a weekly, hey, how's everything going? Just to have a touch base and say, hey, how can I help you? How can you help me? Do you need just to run ideas by each other? Even just to celebrate each other's wins,
Yeah.
especially at the time we were both solopreneurs.
Yes.
So, it's
Yeah,
good to do
absolutely.
that in general.
You're doing it as a team in some
And
sense,
just
or having an accountability partner is always helpful, right? And now I actually go back, got to be 15 years when one of my clients got laid off, and this is back when I was still in Wall Street, and I called them up and I just said, hey, anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask. And they said, okay, great, thanks for checking in. I called every 3 to 4 weeks to my former client, and then they got another job, and it took them quite a long time because they're pretty senior. It took them about 17, 18 months. But 17, 18 months of me just checking in every few weeks, they said when they finally got another job, they said, I was the only one who called regularly. Every other salesperson and trader and broker, they kind of fell off the radar for them. And so that first month that they were in the new seat, they gave me business right away. They said, you know what, you're the only one, who checked in. And I never expected any business from them, right? Because they were just a former client, and I had no relationship with their new firm. But so you never know where it's gonna end up. I actually also had a boss that got laid off once, many years ago, and that same day I took him out for a drink, and I said, hey, you know what? If you haven't gone home yet, let me take you out for a drink. And they said they never forgot that. And so, that's a piece of advice that I love to pass on. If you have a boss that gets laid off, take them out for a drink, because they're going to be a potential safe spot for you, a safe landing spot for you when potentially you need to make a change. Yeah.
Or even just introduce you
Yep.
to someone, at the
Yep.
end of the day.
And what about some other tips if you're seeing colleagues getting laid off, Dan, besides downloading relevant files, KPIs, graphs, analytics, whatever things you can use to showcase your work to potential future employers? What else should people be thinking about as they see
Well,
what's
John
happening
alluded to this.
around them?
Work on your LinkedIn profile, right? So there's no time, there's no better time than when there's a change at your firm, any kind of change, positive or negative, actually, right? To revamp, edit, streamline your LinkedIn profile. There's no better time, and I think that's a key thing that I think people ignore. But anytime there's change, right? There's a reorg, just a reorg. People moving from one department to another, right? No, not even if there's a layoff, but if there's a reorg, we'll update your LinkedIn profile, right? Download some performance reviews, and actually that should be a regular exercise, right? Where you download your contacts, your performance reviews, even kudos emails, where if someone gives you kudos, saying, hey, great job doing this, download that email, right? And keep track of that stuff.
Yeah, which besides helping you get the next role, if you are in that boat, I actually keep a whole file full of thank yous. And I had a mentor tell me, you'll have days where that will be the thing that gets you through the day is just open the drawer and pick up a random thank you note that a colleague, a leader, whoever you worked with just dropped those off on your desk or in your inbox, and keep those for mental health purposes. And when you're feeling the layoff fatigue, which we're going to get to next, that can be a very powerful thing, not just a way to brag about your skill set. So speaking of layoff fatigue, we're giving John, our co-host here, credit for coining the term. Based on our search, we couldn't find anyone using this in the way that he has been with us internally. John, what is layoff fatigue, first of all?
Yeah, so it's sort of the set of psychological and emotional, the feelings and thoughts that you process as you've been going through a layoff, whether it's, in my mind, it's twofold. It's either whether you're someone who's been laid off and you've been going through that process for a very long period of time, right? That's where people start to get the imposter syndrome. Am I even good anymore? Why can't I get a job? And they fail to see how it's not just them, right? As well as people who are in a layoff heavy environment, fearing layoffs, experiencing layoffs in-house, and then getting the burden of being both the survivor, but also someone who's probably taking on more work, right? And so in both instances, I think it's very daunting because it creates a pressure for yourself that might not be realistic and or might not be functional for you to be able to be the best version of yourself when you're trying to find a new job or trying to excel at your job. I think for people who've been enduring the layoff period for a long period of time, it's really reminding yourself what you're good at, reducing the amount of imposter syndrome that you're experiencing. We kind of always go back to this when we talk about this in the AC interview, even. You have to find ways of creating joy in your life outside of work, right? We create such a huge thing about work is so much of who we are, but your coworkers know, even though it's 80% of the time that you spend on this planet, they only get 20% of who you are as a person, right? My coworkers are always surprised by random tidbits about my life that they didn't know about because we are multifaceted beings. And so find things that give you joy to reduce that stress, because that stress can be very paralyzing and it comes up. It really rears its head in interviews. It rears its head when you're trying to be resilient and go day in and day out, not hearing something. And because the application process is so broken, it magnifies this tenfold. So you need to find ways of combating it, reassuring yourself. Uh, I always recommend, and Dan, I think you're a huge proponent of this too, is find some layoff buddies and not people who you're just going to commiserate to eat with each other. You're going to proactively hold each other accountable for taking steps to get your next job. And you're going to celebrate wins. You're going to commiserate losses, but you're going to have a partner who's going to help you be accountable and meet once or twice a week.
Absolutely. Networking is really such a powerful thing, really, in every aspect. And so it's probably a good time to plug one of our classes. It's called Networking at Scale with Content. You can find out more information on the class at our website, futureproof-you.com. And I'm going to I'll plug our holiday coupon code. If you plug in holiday 25, holiday 25, you will get 53% off all of our downloadable classes. So back to your point, though, networking with colleagues, absolutely. Yeah. Start a corporate alumni networking group on LinkedIn, right? And that's a great place to start because everybody should be on LinkedIn. But if you kick it off there, you might actually be known as, oh, you're the head of the alumni group for our company. which actually happened to me by accident for my first company.
I mean, some of us might feel like we'd be creating survivors groups based on some of our past employers,
Yeah.
not alumni
I was gonna
groups.
That's
say
right. That's
alumni
right.
or refugee group. What are we calling it here? Yeah, I one of the thoughts that I have, you guys tell me because you're the recruiters. Can you pick up on layoff fatigue
Oh yeah.
coming through a Zoom or an interview? Regardless of resume and skill set and all of the things that make them proficient technically, can you 2 minutes into a Zoom with a candidate go
Mhm.
like, this person is defeated, they're sunken, they're lost? Is that something that emanates even through a Zoom?
Yeah, yeah, it's that you could feel cynicism oozing from them. You can tell that, like, I've had people, I mean, sometimes they're literally just obvious about it. Like, oh, this is the 100th conversation I've had with a recruiter, so I'm not expecting much. When someone gets to that point, I've had a conversation with someone where I said, listen, I understand that you're dealing with a lot right now. And I know that this is just a recruiter conversation, but if you're wondering what's going to be a barrier, if anything, any part of this conversation is showing through in your interviews, it's the problem. And he's like, well, how can you expect me to be upbeat and friendly in an interview? Like, that's not my job. My job's to do this. And I said to him, I was like, it's your job to make sure people want to work with you. And if you're not a friendly, engaging, high EQ, self aware person, they don't want to work with you. You're going to be a Debbie Downer, and nobody wants to
Yeah.
work with
Well,
that person.
one of my first questions for interviewing a candidate is, I'd love to hear from you. What inspired you to respond to my note and schedule time for this? And uh, you can get it immediately. You get it immediately. Well, I got laid off, and or I just really need a job, and you can just hear their tone. And I will recommend, if they're qualified for this job, and I want to push them, I want to submit them to the client. I will say, listen, let's get ready and we'll prepare for this interview. But one of the things is, I'm going to be here for you, so I'm going to support you as you go through these interviews. And so it's not just on you. I'll be here for you. But we really need to treat this kind of like a dating process, right? And you have to be a sexy candidate for the client. And bitter and angry and sad and despondent is not sexy, and we have to get that out. So if you're not feeling that very positive, complain to me, right? But don't bring that to the interview.
Yeah. It's like, have you ever gone on a date and the first thing someone says to you is like, hey, I just really need to get married and have some kids. My clock's ticking. Did that go over well? No. So
Yeah,
why would it go over well in an interview?
yeah. Something tells me John has actually heard that before.
Me
I don't
neither.
know that I have, but yeah. And one that I think about a lot. I'll use a person in my network. They got let go from a job. It wasn't a performance thing. It was just a difference of opinion between them and their boss. And they were a little bit gun shy. And then 2.5 to 3 years later, they got let go again. It wasn't a performance thing. And they had this belief. And this is where layoff fatigue comes in, where it's like, oh, the industry, the thing, and they externalize all of their problems like it's impossible. And sometimes you need to be this person for someone else, but you might need someone in your network to give you this talk. Is just kind of grab them and say, hey, is it possible that you're still good at your job and you should stay in this field, or whatever it is, and you just have had two bosses you didn't get along with or had different visions? Like, you can create dissonance space between the fact that you've been let go or been looking for X number of months and you're still really good and talented and should stay. So if that's you, you might have to create that dissonance inside your own head. But if you've seen that with other people, you know what I'm talking about, where you kind of have to be that voice of reason and say, hey, for me right now, one of the most talented people I've ever worked with is currently unemployed and looking. That doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means there's an inefficiency in the market and the right employer hasn't found out that they're looking for that type of a role. They will, just didn't happen right away. And that doesn't mean it's a reflection on them or their skill set. So being able to, not take all of that personally might be able to help a little bit with the layoff fatigue.
It it definitely boils down to this concept of locus of control, right? It's my favorite in psychology because a lot of times a lot of mental health issues stem from either an overly external or overly internal locus of control. It's your sense of how much control you have over a certain phenomenon. A lot of people put way too much internal, meaning they have a lot of control over their outcomes with their job search. There are so many external factors that impact your ability to get a job. So don't internalize things that you can't internalize something an interviewer does. The only thing you can hold yourself accountable for is, am I taking enough activities to try and have the right relevant conversations with the right people? And am I doing it in a creative and empathetic way that will engage with others around me? That's the best that you can do. You can't sit there and go, oh, I guess I'm just not good at my job anymore. It just doesn't work. You were good up until a certain point, so I don't understand what will change. It's just like, you just have to find ways of having conversations to tell people why you were great to begin with.
And this is where I hear the little voice of Dan on my shoulder saying, and of all those things outside of your control, the biggest one is timing. And you can't make the job happen or make you be the right person today, but you can take those actions that are preparing you for when the timing lines up. The way that I think of, what John is saying is you're just increasing your surface area for the good things to happen.
Exactly.
Every post is a small percent in your favor. Every networking event, every reach out message is, like a little lotto ticket. And the only way to make sure you don't win is buy no tickets. Your odds go up the more you buy. So just create a lot of surface area for those things that are going to help you.
Yeah. Right.
And if you can do so, do it before you're looking.
Do it before you're looking, for sure.
Yes,
One of the things that people can do is give recommendations on LinkedIn. It's like little lotto tickets that have an extra juice there. It's a little bit extra juice than just a post, because the recommendations on LinkedIn, they really do stay up, right? And a regular post will actually disappear into the feed. But a recommendation that you give to somebody else, you never know. It might actually come back with, the person might come back with a recommendation for you. And that kind of give and take. I would never ask for one, but if you could give one, you never know when you're going to get one. But it also creates that social proof. We talk about social proof here on the show a bunch. Having social proof that you worked with somebody and they did a good job in supporting your success, right? Creates that subliminal social proof on LinkedIn, just like having, all of your KPIs out there. So,
yeah. And finally with outplacement, what should our listeners know or expect in terms of on the way out the door? What should they be doing, or what services should they be
outplacement,
pursuing?
it kind of depends on the company, whether or not they've contracted with an outside firm to help former employees land, right? If you're lucky enough to have worked for a company that provides outplacement, know that the outplacement service, it's kind of a misnomer, right? They're not trying to find you a job. They're trying to set you up so that you can find a job, right? That's the first thing I would say, is that it's a bit of a misnomer. We actually have an article that we've written about outplacement services. It's a primer on outplacement services that we can put into the show notes, but you can also find it on our blog at futureproof-you.com. Really, each service is going to be slightly different, right? So ask certain questions, right? And we have a lot of questions you can ask. One of them is, what kind of services does that outplacement firm provide, right? Is it coaching? Is it access to business databases? I've seen it where, personally, I've seen it where the firm has Bloomberg terminals, so you can look up people and look up their email addresses. It's kind of like having a different aspect of Zoom info, right? But having a different view. Contact info is sometimes really valuable, right? If you can get past the apply button or the easy apply button and find the hiring manager, see if they have that, because that could be much more valuable than just any individual or group coaching. So that's another question: is do they provide group classes or coaching, or do they provide individual? John, any other questions that you would have for outplacement?
Well, usually those, a lot of them also provide like the resume and cover letter writing packages and interview coaching. I think the main thing is just like, what's the success rate of people who go through your outplacement services? Because if it's not a high success rate to find a new job, you may have a better time asking your company to pay for an alternative resource that might be better positioned to actually
and then
help you.
One thing, this goes back to timing, right? And, one of my favorite topics is that everybody forgets about timing. And with outplacement services, some of them will allow you to turn off the service and then turn it back on, because they're going to be contracted for a certain amount of time, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And if you can kind of extend your usage, because if you're not going to use them every day, why have the service be turned on? And so see if you can, turn the clock off and then turn the clock back on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the holidays would be the perfect example of that. Why would you use up 2 weeks when there's no hiring going on, and you'd rather have those 2 weeks in the spring? Yeah, so really in summary, layoffs are not fun, especially when it happens to people in your team or at your organization or family members and friends. It's worse when it's you, but having a mindset of, here's what I can do to help prepare myself, can really lessen the blow and also help you manage that with some of your colleagues as you see them get laid off, so you're not blindsided. If you are looking for a job, trying to make a career pivot, not that us three know anything about that topic, given our personal 2025s, because we've all kind of gone through different versions of that ourselves. Our website is futureproof-you.com. We also are very active on LinkedIn under our personal handles and our company page, Futureproof You. We just want to help you take control of your career and not feel like, you have that layoff fatigue, or you're floating, or you're stuck and there's no other options. Send us a message, comment on one of our posts, and we would love to talk to you and help you future-proof yourself. So thank you, Dan and John, for joining us for this podcast episode on layoffs and the cold corporate practices that we are all navigating during the holidays of 2025. I hope your holidays are not cold nor corporate, but if they are, at least you have this episode. Thanks. I'm Aaron Makelky. We'll catch you on the next one.